ADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar and Conakry. Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio on Newslink here on 94.9 FM and around the world at wadr.org. First, our top stories. Mali's Prime Minister Maïga visits Algeria to revive bilateral cooperation between both countries. Landslide kills at least 30 people and injures 22 others after heavy rains in Conakry.
The number is enormous. People are in the rubble. We are just extracting people.
We have been trying for years to get people to leave this place.
Nigerian social rights group Serap urges Electoral Commission to publish political donation limits and party funding records ahead of the 2027 general elections.
The issue is not simply how much money political parties receive, but where that money comes from, how much is being spent, and whether the rules apply equally to everyone.
And in Côte d'Ivoire, opposition leader Guillaume Soro resurfaces after months out of political spotlight. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is Sankulu Jibril Janko.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast. This edition of Newslink begins in Mali, where Prime Minister Abdoulaye Maïga is expected to arrive in Algeria today on a walk-in visit. Maïga's tour, which is set to strengthen relations between neighboring countries, comes after a period of tense political and security climate. The resumption of talks allowed for the gradual return of ambassadors and the reopening of airspace. Bamako and Algiers are now seeking to consolidate this dynamic with diplomatic, security and economic issues in their sides. Abdullah Hassan tells us more.
Invited by his Algerian counterpart, Sifi Graib, Maïga is expected to meet President Abdelmadjid Tebboune and hold discussions with senior Algerian officials. The talks will focus on strengthening bilateral cooperation and rebuilding trust between Bamako and Algiers. International relations specialist Jean-François Camara says the renewed dialogue could help consolidate progress towards reconciliation.
Mali and Algeria are neighboring countries, and also countries which have shared great stories since independence. So that simply means when the two states understood the security issues, Algeria understood that Mali is a very important state in the fight against terrorism. Mali also understood that Algeria was not only a very important state in the fight against terrorism, but also a very important state in the context of national reconciliation.
But security is likely to remain a key issue. Mali and Algeria share more than 1,300 kilometers of border, an area vulnerable to armed group activity and cross-border trafficking. Camara says the renewed dialogue could improve coordination between the two countries in confronting security threats, particularly in northern Mali.
It is crucial for both states to see how they can put an end to the insecurity that has persisted for so long in central and northern Mali. What needs to be done? Which actors should be involved in this dialogue? How can Algeria or other states help Mali, for example, to secure its territory and, if necessary, to negotiate with certain armed groups? Algeria, I believe, is a very important state in relation to the security situation in northern Mali.
While Maïga's visit marks a potential new chapter in Mali-Algeria relations, the challenge now is to turn the diplomatic move into concrete cooperation and lasting results, particularly on security and border management.
Abdullah Hassan reporting. In neighboring Burkina Faso, prosecutors have requested prison sentences of up to 36 months in a case involving female genital mutilation of 3 girls in Ouagadougou. The case was heard Friday by the Criminal Court of Ouagadougou High Court. 6 women are facing a prosecution over the incident, which reportedly took place on July 14 in the Basengue neighborhood. Francis Boniface completes the report.
The three victims, aged between 7 and 10, were allegedly subjected to excision during the same procedure. According to the Ministry of Justice, one woman identified by the pseudonym Fatu is accused of performing the excisions, while 4 others allegedly facilitated the procedure. A 6th woman, the mother of one of the victims, is also facing charges. Prosecutors are seeking 36 months in prison, including 12 months to be served, and a fine of 500,000 CFA francs, or $891 for Fatu. For the 4 women accused of complicity, the prosecution is seeking the same prison term, but with 8 months to be served, along with a fine of $891. Meanwhile, state lawyers are requesting the acquittal of Minata, the mother of one of the girls, citing a lack of evidence of an offense. The defendants admitted to the acts in court, but said they did not know the practice was illegal. They appealed for leniency. While the victims' parents did not file civil claims, they expressed their dismay over the incident. However, the defense lawyers are asking the courts for leniency and suspended sentences. The trial verdict is expected on August 29.
Francis Boniface with that report. In Guinea, the government says the death toll from a landslide at the Dar es Salaam landfill in Conakry has risen to at least 30 people, with 22 others injured. The disaster occurred around 2 o'clock Sunday morning in the Bessa commune following heavy rains that caused several homes to collapse. Rescue teams and emergency services are searching for people who may still be trapped and recovering bodies. Deborah Amo gives the details.
The Dar es Salaam landfill incident is a repeat of a similar situation which took place in 2017 when a mountain of garbage collapsed onto nearby homes. In the current incident, however, the death toll is high, with around 30 dead and several injured. Victims and survivors shared their stories.
The number is enormous. Precisely in the family, we have 4 to 5 people, and until now, people are in the rubble. We are just extracting people.
The consequences were harmful for our discharge. We cried out so that they could relocate this landfill here. Here are the consequences.
Following the previous tragedy, several awareness sessions were organized by the Ministry of Sanitation and the Military Engineering Corps to encourage the landfill's occupants to leave. However, despite these efforts, many families remained. Colonel Usman Bari and Jenabu Kamara are respectively the coordinator of the eviction operation around the landfill and the Minister of Territorial Administration.
It's regrettable. It's Guineans who died. We didn't want it. We did the best we could. The Military Hygiene Battalion and the Ministry of Sanitation, we fought all these months to be able to raise awareness with the neighborhood chief.
We have been trying for years to get people to leave this place because you yourself have seen the health risks that the area presents for the population. But unfortunately, it is not easy because each time we tend to say that it is God's will, but there is our own human will as well.
On Sunday evening, several buses were mobilized to evacuate survivors and other residents of the landfill. The government intends to permanently close the site in the coming days. The search for victims continued on Sunday evening.
A report by WDR's Cherno Alpha Ibrahim Balde in Conakry, voiced by Deborah Amour.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Now, turning to politics first in Nigeria, the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, is asking the country's Electoral Commission to publish the political contribution limits and financial records of political parties ahead of the 2027 general elections. The organization is also demanding details of how the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, plans to monitor and enforce compliance with political financing rules. Usman Omar reports.
The Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, wants the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, to disclose whether there are prescribed limits on political contributions under the Electoral Act 2026 and publish the limits alongside the details of how they will be enforced. It is also requesting the release of political parties' latest financial records, including audited accounts, election expenditure returns, and reports of violation of political finance rules. Additionally, SERAP is asking INEC to explain how it will monitor cash and in-kind in-kind contributions, digital and social media financing, third-party spending, and other funding arrangements that could circumvent statutory limits. Political analyst Amina Shehu Gadia says SERAP's demand is timely, arguing that transparency in political financing is critical to ensuring fair competition and strengthening public confidence in the electoral process.
The issue is not simply how much money political parties receive, but where that money comes from, how much is being spent, and whether the rules apply equally to everyone. INEC's own 2026 regulations provide for a maximum individual contribution of 500 million and require political parties to submit detailed statements of their assets, liabilities, sources of funds, and expenditure. For me, publishing this information is important because excessive and undisclosed political finances can give wealthy individuals or groups disproportionate influence over elections.
As the country awaits INEC's response, it is worth noting that previous elections in Nigeria have been characterized by heavy monetary involvement, with financial resources often playing a significant role in campaigns, mobilization, and voter engagement. Analysts say excessive spending and unequal access to campaign finance can give wealthier candidates and parties an advantage, potentially influencing electoral outcomes and undermining the principle of equal political participation. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Elsewhere in Côte d'Ivoire, opposition politician Guillaume Soro has resurfaced on the country's political scene after several months of silence. Head of Generations and Peoples in Solidarity (GPS), Soro spoke out on social media following his movement's National Citizens Conference. His reappearance has sparked mixed reactions within Ivorian political circles. While some focused on his physical appearance, others are concerned about his determination to continue his political activities despite the serious legal and political challenges he faces. Christopher Aticho has the rest of the report.
Former Ivorian Prime Minister Guillaume Soro intends to maintain contact with his political base. His recent firm and combative social media post has reignited debate about his political future and his ability to bounce back while he is out of the country. For Nuruddin Oyewole, a political communication expert, this statement is not insignificant. But does Guillaume Soro still possess a real capacity to influence political discourse and the political landscape in Côte d'Ivoire? According to Sidiki Traoré, a journalist and political analyst, the former Speaker of the National Assembly retains a certain amount of political capital. However, his legal troubles in Côte d'Ivoire still constitute a serious obstacle to an effective return to the forefront of the political scene. Between exile, legal constraint, and unwavering loyalty to his supporters, Guillaume Soro remains a political equation far from being definitively resolved.
Christopher Atiche with the details of a report filed by Marcel Aristemble in Abidjan. Several policymakers and diplomats, including civil society leaders, researchers, and members of the African diaspora will meet in Addis Ababa to discuss the future of U.S.-Africa relations. The gathering marks the fourth U.S.-Africa Futures Summit scheduled for Tuesday, August 25, 2026. Organizers include the Open Society Foundation, OSF, Humanity United, Global Futures Collaborative, and the Institute for Security Studies in Africa. This year's meeting marks the first time the summit is being held on the African continent after previous editions in Washington. Imo Edit explains the details.
The summit comes at a time of major geopolitical changes, including growing competition over Africa's critical minerals, changing development partnerships, migration pressures, and concerns over the future of the international rules-based system. 5 key areas will dominate discussions. The first is Africa's role in an increasingly multipolar world. During this session, participants are expected to examine how African countries can turn their growing diplomatic influence into greater bargaining power and ensure the continent is not simply a battleground for competition among global powers. The second focus is development cooperation. Discussions will look at the changing nature of international aid, the need for greater domestic resource mobilization, and ways to build partnerships that support African priorities while reducing dependency. Critical minerals will form another major theme of the event. With global demand for minerals linked to the energy transition increasing, participants are expected to deliberate how African countries can move beyond exporting raw materials and develop local processing, manufacturing, skills and technology. Migration, mobility and the role of the African diaspora will also be examined. Organizers say the broader goal of the summit is to develop practical recommendations for a stronger U.S.-Africa partnership, while giving African countries a greater voice in shaping their place in a changing global order.
More added with those details. You're listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. We are streaming live at wadr.org and on Facebook and YouTube at WADR English. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Mali's Prime Minister Maïga visits Algeria to revive bilateral cooperation between both countries. Landslide kills at least 30 people and injures 22 others after heavy rains in Conakry. Nigerian social rights group SERAP urges Electoral Commission to publish the political donation limits and party funding records ahead of 2027 general elections. And in Côte d'Ivoire, opposition leader Guillaume Soro resurfaces after months out of a political spotlight. Still ahead in the news, we have the press review, guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
Connecting Ghana to West Africa. This is Nadidi Tete in Accra, and you're listening to WADR 94.9 FM, Dakar.
In Benin, 10 officials from the Directorate of Examinations and Competitions are facing legal proceedings over alleged financial misconduct involving allowances paid to teachers supervising the 2026 primary school certificate exams. The case was announced over the weekend in Cotonou by Republican police spokesperson Captain Major Eric Oru Yerima. Several teachers complained that part of their exam supervision allowances was being withheld. Augustine Colley reports.
The Republican police say the investigation uncovered an organized system involving educational officials who allegedly controlled the lists of teachers assigned to examination centers. According to investigators, the secretary of the directorate's management played a central role, allegedly working with several other officials. Authorities say the practice had continued for several years, with some staff remaining silent because they feared reprisals. The alleged deductions were substantial. Teachers were officially entitled to 200,000 CFA francs or $356 for supervising the exams. Investigators also mentioned up to 160,000 CFA francs, roughly $285, were allegedly withheld, leaving some teachers with only 40,000 CFA francs or $71. Police also alleged that the officials had created an unofficial system allowing each of them to recommend at least 5 relatives for positions on examination duty lists. 8 of the 10 suspects have been taken to the Special Prosecutor's Office of the Court for the Repression of Economic Crimes and Terrorism, known as CREAT. One of the main suspects has been placed in pre-trial detention, while 7 others are continuing proceedings under judicial summons. The investigation remains ongoing as authorities seek to determine the total amount allegedly misappropriated and whether the system extended to other school districts or related services.
Augustine Colley filed that report.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
For today's press review, let's join WDR's Osman Omar in Abuja, Nigeria's capital.
Nigeria's major newspapers this Monday lead with a mix of politics, economic reforms, public accountability and growing concerns over the welfare of citizens. Now, let's begin with The Guardian, which focuses strongly on the economy and governance. It leads reports that 14 years after the Orosanya report, Nigeria's bloated government agencies are estimated to cost the country about 1 trillion naira in 2026. The Guardian also reports that Nigeria is seeking $20.5 billion from banks to expand renewable electricity, highlighting the huge financing required to address the country's persistent power challenges. On politics, the Punch newspaper gives prominent attention to to the renewed argument over fuel subsidy. The federal government and the APC, that is the ruling political party in Nigeria, are rejecting former Vice President Atiku Abubakar's proposal for a return to subsidy, warning that it could reverse economic gains. Punch reports that the controversy is becoming another major fault line ahead of the 2027 general elections. The newspaper also highlights pressure from pensioners who have issued the federal government a 21-day ultimatum to pay their outstanding 150,000 naira palliative allowance, threatening a peaceful protest if the money is not paid by September 10. Daily Trust, meanwhile, brings the 2027 political season further into focus, with growing activity around opposition parties and President Bola Tinubu's re-election campaign. It also reports development around the G100 Opposition Summit, now scheduled for August 31. Across the three newspapers, therefore, one theme stands out. Nigeria is entering an increasingly intense political season, while economic hardship and security remain unresolved questions. And that's the package for this afternoon as I return you back to the studios.
Many thanks, Osman Omar, for the press review.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is a guest.
Our guest this afternoon is Kola Wole Oluwadare, Deputy Director at Nigeria's Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP. As we told you earlier in the news, the organization is calling on the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, to publish the threshold for financial contributions to political parties ahead of the 2027 elections. Well, SERAP says greater transparency on political financing is crucial to preventing undue influence and strengthening Nigeria's electoral processes. Well, let's hear from Kola Wole Oluwadare on why this call is important.
Our call is predicated against the background of the experience of Nigerians in previous election cycles, 2023, 2019, up until 1999. That specifically the role that money plays in our campaign and electioneering and even in the politics in Nigeria. And given the provisions of the Electoral Act, which I also believe foresees these kind of things, which has given INEC, that is the electoral umpire, the ability to determine the threshold in terms of political contributions by individuals or corporate bodies to political parties and candidates, is why we've taken that step so that INEC can do that, and not only do it, but be seen to have do that by the electorate, so that it increases confidence in INEC as an institution, and even in the process leading up to the elections early next year.
Is there really a constitutional provision that stipulates or mandates INEC to publish the threshold or a cap on political contributions?
There are provisions in the Electoral Act that gives INEC the power to determine that threshold, not only to determine it, but to also publish it to Nigerians. It's in the Electoral Act 2026. It's also in the previous Electoral Act, the Electoral 2022, so it's not a new provision. INEC has those powers to regulate political parties generally in the Constitution.
Well, in your opinion, why is it that INEC has not published the cap or threshold for contributions to political parties in recent times? Or is it possible that it has, but it was never really made public?
I do not know why INEC hasn't done this in the past. I would want to actually believe that INEC has done so. Perhaps it wasn't made public, which is why our request is also asking INEC if that has been done and if the answer is in the negative, for INEC to do so promptly. Because I see no reason why INEC would not do this very significant part of his duties in leading up to the elections. And I think this is a call that should be echoed by all other organizations, but also by the electorates, who I'm sure wants to see INEC succeed in its job up to credible elections that would ultimately the various government offices come next year.
There are countries out there that are also approaching elections, and this same call is being made. Now, to what extent would SERAP say that money politics or the influence of money on politics really erodes confidence in the entire democratic system or governance
it's bad, and poverty makes it worse. And that is why our advocacy is backed by not only the law, the constitution, and the electoral act in Nigeria, but by the experiences we've seen over time, particularly in Africa, where the poverty level is high and unemployment is at an all-time low. And we've seen that over the years, particularly in Nigeria since 1999, how those who have access to wealth, whether it's illicit or even legitimate, can use it to sway the opinion of the people, or sometimes even subvert the process to get away with anti-electoral offenses. And that is why we must, at this time, with the rise of anti-democratic governments in Africa, ensure that we protect democracy, not only as a system of governance, but also all the processes and institutions that lead up to democracy, and confers it with legitimacy as against military rule.
And so finally, clearly your message, Kolawole, is that African politics should be guided by policy politics and not money politics.
Of course, money politics will not make democracy function as it is. And I'm talking of the election itself and governance that would follow after the elections. Democracy should be governed by ideas and policies. What does the government or the candidate or the political party stand for? When that is influenced by money, money is not a policy. The money is not an ideology. Money, particularly for those who are obtained from illicit funds, can really get the wrong people into office. And that is why money, as much as possible, which also features in a lot of laws throughout the world in the electoral laws, should be the least of what becomes the tool that determines what the people vote for, how they vote, or who eventually they vote for.
Kolawole Oluwadare is Deputy Director at Nigeria's Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP. Well, in sports, we begin with athletics because the Ethiopian distance runner Yomiv Kejelcha has set a new men's half marathon world record in Buenos Aires, Argentina. The 29-year-old clocked 56 minutes, 51 seconds, cutting 29 seconds of Jacob Kiplimo's previous record of 57.2 seconds. Well, the record is subjected to official ratification. While still in athletics, Moroccan Olympic champion Soufiane El Bakkali suffered his first defeat of the 2026 Diamond League season, finishing second in a 3,000-meter steeplechase in Kozo, Poland. Ethiopian Godana Gamechu won in 8 minutes 2.74 ahead of El Bakkali in 8 minutes 4.61. Morocco's Salah Eddin Ben Yashid completed the podium in 8 minutes 5.8 seconds. And in football, African footballers signed in European leagues. We begin with African footballers played their match at European over the weekend, with several finding the net. In England, Senegalese defender Nobel Mendy scored on his debut for Hull City in their 2-0 win over Manchester United. In France, Senegal's Dame Gueye scored in Le Mans' 2-2 draw with Brest. While in Turkey, Egyptian star Mohamed Salah netted twice for Trabzonspor in a 2-1 victory over Başakşehir. Meanwhile, Ivorian young star Yan Jamande helped Real Madrid secure a late 2-1 win over Espanyol. We've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Ismaila Kamara and Umu Danyogo for the technical assistance. We'll do interact with us via our social media platforms, including X, Instagram, and Facebook at WADR English. Well, coming up is WDR's Health Flags program, World Body, and the topic Imo and his guests are speaking about this morning is cost of healthy living. I am Sankule Jibril Janko. Good afternoon.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Graft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.